Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I hope everyone is keeping wonderfully well on this very wonderfully well Monday. There you go. It's been a couple of days since we uploaded any videos on this channel. I've been away, so I hope everyone's keeping all very well indeed. And well, this is quite the video to come back to, really, because we're going to be looking at the best players from every county in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship this year and the league. We're going to be going through every county and basically picking their player of the year. You know, if every county had its own player of the year awards, which I'm pretty sure they do, and it usually just has some kind of dodgy sponsor kind of put in front of it or whatever. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going through all 31 counties. Obviously, Kilkenny senior footballers don't play football, although they did play in the junior All-Ireland. But you get my point, and I didn't see any of them play. So obviously, why would we have Kilkenny in here before we have any smart Alex in the comments or even afterwards? We will be looking at London and New York as well, though. So 33 teams in total to run through. The best player from every single county in 2022. Now, a few things to bear in mind. First of all, I obviously haven't watched every single county play every single game. So for sure, I'm going to get some of these wrong. And for the counties who don't normally be on TV, sadly, you know, do feel free to let me know which players you would have instead. And some of these players will obviously that, you know, from counties that I haven't seen, such as Waterford, Carlow, those kind of counties. Obviously, you'll be looking more statistics, who scored the most, who's been the players on people's lips, and all the rest. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get straight into it. If people could smash the like button and subscribe, that would be much appreciated as well. And I suppose we will start off with Antrim, and we will go in alphabetical order, county by county. Starting off with Antrim, and I mean, what can you say about Antrim? I mean, they were probably one of the lowest scorers in the entire championship, so this was a difficult one, I'm not going to lie. I mean, Ryan Murray scored 22 points in 9 games this year, so he was very impressive. But I think the most impressive thing from an Antrim perspective, and one of the reasons why they finished so high in Division 3, in my opinion, was their defence. I think Enda McGinley had them really well tuned defensively. So I've gone for the fullback, Ricky Johnston, for that very reason. Now, as I said, have I watched every single minute of Antrim play? Absolutely not. So this one could be absolute waffle. And if it is, feel free to call me out on it in the comments down below. But look, I think Antrim defensively have looked very, looked good considering the division that they were at. And considering that they were actually one of the lowest scorers in Division 3, despite actually nearly getting promoted. So, you know, I think you got to give the Antrim defence a lot of credit. And I think Enda McGinley had them really well organised defensively, in my opinion. So that is the reason for going with Ricky Johnston of Antrim. Moving on to Armagh. Look, it's an obvious one. It's an absolute obvious one, and it is Mr. Rian O'Neill. Look, there's been plenty of other Armagh players who've really stepped it up this year. Charlie O'Byrne's has been absolutely brilliant. Rory Grugan's been fantastic. Stephen Campbell's performance against Donegal and against Tyrone was absolutely sensational. But you just cannot look past the man that is Rian O'Neill. He scored 240 in 11 games this season, which very much shows his quality. And you think as well, that free right at the end of the game against Galway, obviously, to level it and then send the game to extra time. It was just absolutely out of this world, and an extraordinary talent, an extraordinary player, and certainly for Armagh fans, they'd be very happy to have him in their ranks. And yeah, absolutely sensational year. Moving on, we've Carlow, and we've gone for Colm Hutton. He scored 122 this year, the majority of which from play. It was really between him and Dara Foley. Again, Carlow is another one of them tricky ones where I haven't seen them play at all this year. You know, so I mean, for any Carlow fans watching who feel like there might be anyone different, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. But look, you're looking at someone like Colm Hutton. Haven't heard of him too much before this season, but he's come in there and scored 122, and that's a very good return in a team that has struggled, you know, for the majority of this season. Had a couple of good spells in the Tailteann Cup, but generally speaking, throughout the league in Division 4, you know, they were beaten from pillar to post on most weeks, let's be perfectly honest. But Dara Foley with 30 points in 9 games, very impressive as well. And but you know, Colm Hutton, I don't think you can look past him, especially with Paul Broderick retiring before the end of the season. To have someone new come in there, I believe be new, or maybe he just wasn't on the scene before. score 122 is very, very impressive indeed. Moving on to our good friends from Cavan, and I mean, it was a tricky one in some respects here, because I mean, you do obviously have the phenomenal talent that is Gerard McKernan, and I thought he had a very, very good season from a Cavan perspective. Obviously, when I put this out on Twitter earlier, our good friend John McMahon, who's been on the podcast many times before, shout out to him if he's watching, although I'm sure he's getting the tissues ready for Manchester United, Liverpool. But yeah, he was saying Gerard Smith, and look, that's a fair assumption as well. You know, Gerard Smith has obviously had a very, very good season. You know, from a Cavan perspective, I should have an image here of Paddy Lynch for some reason. He's gone completely missing on me, but it is Paddy Lynch. He is the guy that we have gone for, or that I've gone for personally, because I just don't think you can look past how good he was at times this year. He was a little bit maybe quiet in the Tailteann Cup, especially sort of in the latter rounds. Was sort of quiet enough in the final, I felt. Maybe didn't have you know, sort of as good a season as what you'd want there, but he did score 440, and I do think that's an impressive return. Unfortunately, I have no idea what's going on with this stream. For some reason, the image won't go up there. So, yeah, maybe some Monaghan fans are tuning in there. They don't want Paddy Lynch going up on the screen. But yeah, moving on to Clare, and we have Keelan Sexton. And yeah, Keelan Sexton for me. You know, I think it was between him and probably Owen Cleary. But 327 is an exceptional return. Paddy Lynch, by the way, scored 440. I think I forgot to mention that. So that's kind of one of the main reasons for putting him in there, even though he had a slow enough season. But for Clare, Keelan Sexton, 327 again. Very, very impressive season from Keelan Sexton this year. I think he had a very, very good season. You know, you think of that performance against Roscommon, some of those points right at the end of the game, I think was absolutely you know, sensational in many ways. And look, he's just he's a big player to obviously have in there from a Clare perspective. And you know, you think of the void that Clare have probably suffered in the last couple of seasons, losing such a, you know, a star midfielder in a man like Gary Brennan. But you know, I think Keelan Sexton was absolutely brilliant, and some of those points against Roscommon were really, really good indeed. Owen Cleary, Aaron Griffin, Cathal O'Connor, very, very close there. Cathal O'Connor had a very good year from midfield for Clare this year. But again, I don't think you can look past a man like Keelan Sexton, who I think had a very, very good season indeed. Moving on to Cork, and for me, again, this is another obvious one, really. You know, look, you're looking at Ian Maguire, Brian Hurley, two players who very good seasons for Cork, in my opinion, and I think relegation could have been very likely had it have not been for them too. But you can't look past Stephen Sherlock, because, you know, they would not have been in the quarterfinals of the All-Ireland if it hasn't been for him. I mean, what a sensational year he's had. Not only has he been brilliant for Cork, but he's also been outstanding for St. Finbarrs as well, and played an absolute huge role in them obviously getting to the All-Ireland Club semi-finals. So, you know, for me, you can't look past Stephen Sherlock. 161 in total this year. An outstanding number to have from a Cork perspective. You think this is a Cork side that, you know, struggled a lot of the time in Division 2 this season. They had some tough games as well, obviously against the likes of Kerry and Dublin in the Championship. And even in that game at Croke Park as well, you know, between Dublin and Cork, a game which I was at, Sherlock was brilliant in the first half, and Dublin really, really struggled with him. And it does lead you to think, if Cork can get a few more players like him, which are few and far between, by the way, you know, who knows what Cork will do next year? Who knows? Probably, I think they'll still stay up in Division 2. I think they'll have enough. But yeah, plenty of comments flying in there. So much appreciated. If people could smash the like button, be much appreciated. Hello, Aaron. Hope you're doing good. I am doing good, Rory. I am doing good. I hope things are going well. Brian Hurley. Yeah, look, Brian Hurley definitely in the conversation. But for me, I would go with Sherlock. I think he just had a bit more of a better season, in my opinion. But we have Derry then, and I think, you know, you can't look past a player of the quality of Brendan Rodgers, in my opinion. I think he was absolutely brilliant. Derry was a difficult one, by the way, because there was a lot of very, very good players here. I mean, he had Chrissy McCaig, Shane McGuigan, Conor Glass, Benny Heron was very good. Garrett McKinless was excellent. Like for Derry, you could really pick out 4 or 5 player of the years. If any one of these had played for any other county, well, they wouldn't have reached an All-Ireland semi-final, first of all, but also they'd probably be that county's best player of the year because, they were outstanding. But I think when you look at it in terms of impact of games, I think Brendan Rodgers, for me, has just done that bit more, whether he's been playing at fullback or even in midfield as well. I think he's been very, very good. I mean, Shane McGuigan finishes one of the championship's top scorers. What was it, 1-9 from play in that game versus Clare, which was outstanding. But, you think of Rodgers' impact in the game versus Donegal in the Ulster final. He scores 2 decisive score. He scores a decisive score at the end of the game. He sets up, I think, Conor Glass for another decisive score as well. He was just absolutely brilliant for me, and he epitomised everything that was brilliant about this Derry side. And whether he was in midfield, fullback, even playing a halfback at times, I think Rodgers was absolutely sensational from a Derry point of view. We do have Donegal then, and look, Conor O'Donnell had a very good season coming into Donegal this year. I thought he was very impressive. Michael Murphy, I thought stood up in some of the big games. I thought he was impressive enough, even in that Ulster final. But again, it has to be their sharpshooter and their main man, and it is Paddy McBrearty, because he scored 433 in total. Some would say maybe he was a little bit quiet, sort of in the back end of the championship. He was a little bit quiet maybe in that, sort of towards the end of the Derry game, and maybe a little bit so in the defeat to Armagh as well. But for me, I don't think you can look past McBrearty. Donegal was a difficult one because they sort of had a very weird season. They barely stayed up in Division 1. Comfortably stayed up, but we're nowhere near the league finals. And a couple of good championship games. But I think when you look at McBrearty's numbers, it's hard to disagree. But any Donegal fans watching, I mean, feel free to disagree. But for me, it is Paddy McBrearty. We have Down, and Down is our next county. Now, this was a tough one. Because Down, Down were just rubbish, really, from the get-go this season. I mean, there's no two ways about it, really, and it's very hard to sort of think of anyone here, to be honest. But from watching Down in the Tailteann Cup game against Cavan, or was it not against Cavan? Monaghan, actually, sorry, in the championship. Andy Gilmore was a player that I was impressed with, and I think given that Down have had a lot of turmoil for the wrong reasons this season, they've looked all over defensively. There's been problems behind the scenes, players not willing to play, players opting out. One player who I hadn't heard too much about, to be honest, going into this season was Andrew Gilmore, and he scored 121 in 9 games. Now, 121 in 9 games might sound like the biggest tally. I mean, we just mentioned Paddy McBrearty, who scored 433 in total. Obviously played, a handful of more games there from a Donegal perspective. But Down were one of the lowest scorers in the entire championship. In fact, in terms of how much they scored, with the amount of games that they played, I think they were the lowest scorers, or they were one of the lowest scorers in the championship. When you look at points per game and sort of average it all out. So, I think Andy Gilmore deserves, or Andrew Gilmore, whichever one he wants to be called there, I think was impressive. We have everyone's second favourite county up next, and that is Dublin. And Dublin was just, look, Con O'Callaghan was absolutely brilliant in the 3 games that he played in the Leinster Championship. He actually, I think, finished as the top scorer in the entire championship, which is kind of remarkable. But he played 3 games, 3 games all season, one of which, was against, one of the sides who were low down in Division 4 in Con O'Callaghan. They played a Meath side that haven't looked right for a few years, and Kildare just didn't turn up whatsoever. Not to take anything away from Con O'Callaghan, still had a brilliant season. But if you're looking at a player who had more of an impact, who had a brilliant game in the All-Ireland semi-finals against Kerry, in my opinion, as well, it was Mr. Kieran Kilkenny. And I don't think you can look past him, in my opinion. He was Dublin's player of the season last year, without a shadow of a doubt, in 2021. And he's been Dublin's player of the year again in 2022. I mean, he's not a scorer. Like, well, he is a scorer, but he's not the man you look at to win you the game with 7 or 8 points, or to be scoring 2-7 or 2-8. Like, he's not a marksman sort of player in terms of a Con O'Callaghan, a Dean Rock, a Cormac Costello. But he still finished with 122 in 9 games, which is very, very impressive. And it's also his link-up play as well, his build-up play. He's able to spot men in front of him, pick out passes. He tracks back brilliantly as well. I think he's the unsung hero of the championship, in my opinion. I think it was absolutely brilliant. James McCarthy, would come very close there, albeit he suffered with a couple of different injuries throughout the league and the championship. Dean Rock, didn't contribute enough from play, but still scored a lot in total when you look at his final numbers. So, but again, Ciarán Kilkenny for me, hands down the Dublin Footballer of the Year, shall we say, right there. Fermanagh up next. Again, very, very hard to, when a player scores a huge amount of numbers, and when you've seen them play, you've seen the sort of one marksman and the one marks player stand out, you can't look past them. And whilst Fermanagh, I think, have shown some impressive signs of Conal Jones coming back in. He looked very good with Derry Gonley Harps earlier in the year. Kieran Corrigan looks like a very good player as well. But I think you can't look past Sean Quigley. You're scoring 446 in 10 games. One of the top scorers if you combine both league and championship. I think he's 3rd or 4th. And he's doing it in a Fermanagh side that, again, haven't really, they didn't really ever threaten for promotion in Division 3. They were sort of struggling at different times in the season. They were knocked out in the Tailteann Cup quarterfinals. So a lot of the times, again, like when a player is able to score that much in a team that's struggling, or a team that maybe, it isn't winning games, by comfortable margins, getting loads of space. For example, with Kerry, obviously David Clifford, spoiler alert, he's obviously going to be the Kerry Footballer of the Year, but if you do a job on Clifford, you've got other players then to worry about. Whereas with Fermanagh, you take Quigley out of the game, there's not too many other players there that can contribute, and I think that puts more pressure on someone like a Sean Quigley to perform and do his absolute best. So absolutely, hands down for me, it is Mr. Sean Quigley. We've got Galway up next. By the way, hopefully, if I do forget any counties, I am going alphabetically. I have it all written down here, but if I do forget any, do let me know in the comments live, and we will go back to it sometimes. Sometimes my brain just doesn't work. So yeah, but Galway. Again, this is sort of one of them that you don't really, we know it's Shane Walsh. He's been absolutely unbelievable. But Galway, again, much like Derry, have had a lot of very, very good performers. Killian McDade was outstanding. Damien Comer, as we've seen in that All-Ireland semi-final performance. What a display that was. You've got Rob Finnerty, who's been very good. Sean Kelly's been very good. But Shane Walsh has just been absolutely next level. 357 in 12 games. That performance in the All-Ireland final was absolutely out of this world. I still can't get over that point he scored from, it was about 30, 40 yards, and he sort of just bends it, not even much of a wind-up, and he does it so comfortably. It didn't even look like he put that much power into it. And it just sailed over the bar. Absolutely incredible. And who knows? He could be lined now for Kilmacud Croke soon, which would be entertaining from a Dublin Senior Football Championship. But as someone who's very much behind Whitehall Comkill this year, that is not what we want to see. And I think Whitehall will probably beat them anyway. I'm joking. They probably won't. But yeah, Rory says, one of my favourite players, Ciarán Kilkenny, brilliant against Kerry. He could have won it for the Dubs, but he still brilliantly deserves it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if any Dublin player is going to win an All-Star this season, I think it has to be Ciarán Kilkenny, surely. I think he definitely, you could argue a case for Con O'Callaghan, but having just played 3 games, it's a little bit short when there probably has been better forwards and more forwards who had more of an impact. But yeah, as you said there, Ciarán Kilkenny's been has been absolutely outstanding. As I said there, in terms of a Kerry player, it's unanimous. It is David Clifford. He's probably going to win Footballer of the Year. As I've said before, I would still lean towards Shane Walsh. Walsh has scored more, or he hasn't scored more, but for me, he's had more of an impact in a lot of the games he's played. But again, it's really you're sort of flipping coins, and like it's one of them that for me it's either or. You could give it to either or, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, that's not the topic of today's conversation. I probably walked myself into more abuse in the comments down below. But David Clifford, 649 in 12 games, outrageous talent, outrageous scores right there. I mean, look, from a Kerry perspective, you could look at Tom O'Sullivan with a very good year. Gavin White was very impressive. I mean, Sean O'Shea at different times this year was outstanding. And you think of that point in the All-Ireland semi-final versus Dublin, which was, probably arguably you could say the greatest moment of the championship this year, and possibly the greatest GAA moment of this year. As sad as that sounds as a Dublin fan, but it probably is true. But, Paddy Clifford was great. But again, you just cannot look past David Clifford. I think he was absolutely outstanding in my opinion. Anyways, but moving on from that, we do have Kildare. And look, I mean, Daniel Flynn was very impressive this season from a Kildare perspective. Kevin O'Callaghan was very good as well. But Jimmy Hoyland, I think, for me, has just taken Kildare's attack to the next level. I mean, he's the reason why, in my opinion, Kildare won 5 games this season, or not won 5 games, sorry, finished with 5 points in Division 1. We're very competitive. He's an outstanding talent. He's a very, very good player, and he's very young as well. People forget that. He's only sort of burst on the scene in the last couple of seasons. And, I think you're looking at a Kildare side that has a lot of good attackers coming through. I mean, Daniel, if you're asking who is the best player in Kildare, I would say Daniel Flynn. But if you're asking who's the top performer in Kildare based on 2022, you'd have to say Jimmy Hoyland. And I think the numbers of 452, I think, speak for themselves. I think he's more consistent than Flynn. And I think, Flynn has been out of the team sometimes with injuries and different things. So for me, I would have to lean towards Mr. Jimmy Hoyland there in my opinion. Shane says Jason Foley for me in terms of a Kerry player. That's a very, very good saying there. No way Shane Walsh had more of an impact. Turned up all big games. Walsh did too, but not really against Derry, but probably down to Derry's system either. Walsh or Clifford. To me, it's Clifford ever. Yeah, look, that's your opinion, my man. Feel free to have that opinion. Sean O'Shea free against Dublin still breaks my heart. Do you know how I'm feeling? Absolutely. But sure, look, I think I think it's time to move on from that now, and credit Kerry for obviously the season that they had. They had a very, very good year, and fair play. And look, sometimes these happen. Dublin had their moment with Cluxton. Kerry had their moment, and I'm sure Dublin will have their moments at some stage again. By God, we've had enough of them, as some people would say. Moving on to Laois, very difficult one because, again, the next sort of couple of counties that begin with L, I'm going to be honest, seen very, very little of them. Seen a bit of Laois here or there, highlights on the Sunday game and everything else, and obviously had a very disappointing season. I mean, relegate from Division 3, having come down from Division 2, knocked out of the Tailteann Cup early, knocked out of the Championship early, losing to Wicklow. Like, very, very disappointing season for Laois. Gary Walsh, excellent with 429 in 8 games, albeit the majority of them were from place ball. So I've actually gone for Mark Barry, who's a young player who's actually come through the ranks for Laois at the minute. Probably a player that not many know about, but he scored 323 in total. And again, like what I was saying with Sean Quigley earlier, when you think of players that play for counties that are struggling, that are getting beat week in, week out, it probably affects your confidence, first of all, affects the team's confidence, affects the morale. It probably means that you don't get good ball going into you like a lot of the top teams do. And you have to make things happen, out of your own doing. You have to fend for your own scraps pretty much. And, Mark Barry coming up from the under-20s last year or this year, I'm not sure, but 323 in total in a struggling team, I think that's very, very impressive in my opinion anyway. So, but yeah, moving on from that, Leitrim. Again, I think this one probably does pick itself. As I said, Leitrim in Division 4, haven't seen, as much of them play as personally I would have wanted to, but you are looking at keeper, and I mean 360 in 10 games is very, very impressive. He finished as one of the top scorers in the in the entirety of 2022, if you're to count both league and championship. And he's been critical. And from every time I've seen Leitrim, in that game versus Sligo, for example, in the Tailteann Cup, which they were probably harshly done by, to be fair. Again, a sharpshooter, a very, very good player. And I thought he had an outstanding season from a Leitrim perspective. Tom Pryor, Ryan O'Rourke had very good years. Emlyn Mulligan, I'm sure, impressed at different times in the season as well. But as I was saying, I don't think he can look past the talent that is Mr. Keeper. And moving on to Limerick, difficult one with Limerick. I mean, probably not the most free scoring in terms of points. Josh Ryan finished with 340, and he sort of looks like an old school target man when you consider the height of him. I think he's nearly 6'3" or 6'4". I mean, when he came off the bench against Cork, you were sort of like, Jesus, is this man even real? To be honest with you, an absolute unit of a bloke. But I think you would have to look at Ian Corber for me. I mean, to be fair, this lad's a unit as well. Finished with 5 points, all coming from wing back as well. He's sort of from watching Limerick against Cork and from different times in Division 2, obviously that the Division 2 league final against Louth stands out pretty much. Ian Corber is, he plays at wing back, and he's, I suppose by trade you could say, a defender, but he's the man who's setting things up as well, and sometimes he's playing the pass before the pass, if that makes sense, or he's playing the ball into midfield, who then sort of play it onto the forwards. It seems like anything good that comes from Limerick a lot of the time comes through him, and I think he's had a brilliant season from a Limerick perspective. We then have London, and I mean, look, London's obviously a very tricky one again. I mean, have I seen London play this season? Absolutely not. But I think you look at Liam Gavahan coming into the side, 223 this year, a Division 4 side that, I think a lot of people very much expected to struggle in Division 4. I mean, given the fact that, they hadn't played a competitive match in 2 seasons. But in he comes, scores 223, and looks absolutely brilliant in doing so. And fair play to London. London, they're an absolute credit to the GAA. I mean, for having 2 years off because of COVID, obviously completely outside their control, coming back in and being as competitive as they have been, I think is for me nothing short of remarkable, really. I mean, James Gallagher was brilliant with 3-9. Not the lad who plays for Oasis. Actually, that's Liam Gallagher, isn't it? Liam Gallagher, yeah. Sorry, I was mixing up Liam Gavahan and James Gallagher, but James Gallagher, obviously, not related to the Oasis brothers. But yeah, 3-9. I mean, look, he was impressive again. I mean, anyone for London that played really sort of stood out. So I don't think you can look past that one, in my opinion. Patrick says Armagh will win Ulster next year. You know what? I think they need to be thereabouts. I think, when you're looking at teams like Derry reaching, Ulster finals, winning the Ulster Championship, and Cavan winning a couple of seasons ago as well. Armagh clearly have the talent. I mean, they beat the same teams that Derry beat in the Championship this year. The only difference was they beat them in the back door. Obviously, didn't beat Monaghan, but at the same time, they beat Monaghan, I think, in the league, didn't they? So going off on a bit of a tangent, but I think Armagh surely have to be competing for Ulster next year. Moving on to Longford, and a difficult one with Longford. I mean, Joe Hagan scored 114, looked impressive, but I think Darren Gallagher has just been a player that anytime I've watched Longford personally, and anytime I've seen them play, I think he's been absolutely brilliant. I mean, playing in midfield or in that half forward line, I think he's been impressive. And Longford was a tricky one because they haven't been, free scoring. They maybe don't have like a standout forward, such as you could say, in terms of, obviously Fermanagh of Sean Quigley. There's a particular player that plays for Louth that we're going to be mentioning in a couple of minutes. There's a couple of standout forwards here or there, and Darren Gallagher, or Longford probably don't have that, but they've had to rely on scores from other areas of the pitch, and Darren Gallagher has been brilliant. A lot of them have been from frees, and place balls. But from when I have seen Longford, breaking up the play, and I think without him in their team, I think they would have been relegated, I'd say, to Division 4, in my opinion. So, yeah, very, very strong season indeed for Mr. Darren Gallagher. I mean, Louth is, again, well, for me anyway, it's an obvious one, maybe not for other people, but I don't think you can look past Sam Mulroy. I mean, he's been absolutely unbelievable. He actually finishes as the top scorer in both league and championship. He finishes with 573, which is, I mean, that's just absolutely outrageous, and in many ways probably unheard of. From a player of Louth, anyway, you could say, and I think he's probably putting himself in the conversation for one of the best players to ever come out of the county. I mean, I know Louth have won All Irelands before in the past, or won a All Ireland. I think was it one, maybe it was more. Maybe Louth fans will be able to remember players from that era. But look, he was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you have to give credit to other players. I mean, Conor Grimes, Kieran Byrne were impressive. In particular, Conor Grimes in that Division 2 final. But when you're looking at a player who scores 573 in 11 games, I mean, you're looking at that and like it's incredible. Like, it's 36-7 points on average per game. It's just absolutely outrageous, in my opinion, from a Louth perspective. Moving on to Mayo. They might have a new manager already, or is Kevin McStay confirmed? I don't know, but one player that Kevin McStay or whoever the new Mayo manager will want to, or whoever the new Mayo manager will be, they'll certainly want to be keeping Lee Keegan wrapped in cotton wool, and they certainly won't want him to go into retirement anytime soon. I mean, he's, for me, he's been Mayo's best player of this sort of generation of Mayo players. Like, if you think back to when they've sort of started reaching All-Ireland finals and winning Connacht titles, you think of around the sort of 2011, 2012 mark where, this era of players of Keegan, O'Shea, Killian O'Connor all started coming through. I think Lee Keegan's been the best of that because he's, whilst other players, maybe their performances have dropped on the big occasion or maybe they haven't got it right. I think Lee Keegan 9 times out of 10 has got it right. And I think he's been an unbelievable defender. I think he's been an unbelievable leader. He scores big goals in big moments. And this season in particular, he was brilliant again because, Mayo's defense wasn't terrible. It was reasonably well, I thought, all things considered. What let Mayo down in the end was injuries forwards and probably just came to the end of the cycle for Mayo. I mean, Ryan O'Donoghue was unbelievable when he was on the pitch. He scored 242 in total, which is an outstanding number. But I just think Keegan has just been that bit better. And again, a bit like what I was saying with Ian Corbett, where, Corbett of Limerick would sort of be the man to set things up. Keegan would often be that as well. He's not a traditional out-and-out quarterback that you would have seen 15, 20 years ago. Like, he's venturing forward, he's getting forward, he's supporting attacks, and very often are not contributing with points himself. Finished himself with a couple of points this season as well. So, I don't think you can look past the talent and the levels that is Lee Keegan this year. I mean, Mayo in general in the championship probably weren't that great, so it probably was a bit more of a tricky one. But Mashuran was very good in the early part of the league, but probably didn't have the same impact as the championship went on. But I do think Lee Keegan had a very, very impressive season from a Mayo point of view. Moving on to Meath. Meath had a very disappointing season. I mean, let's be perfectly honest right there. I mean, they certainly didn't hit the standards that we'd want to see. And Andy McAtee's gone. In comes Colm O'Rourke, another Sunday game pundit. I mean, the Sunday game are probably going to need a few positions next season. I'm available, although, I mean, why on earth would they pick me? It's, I mean, come on. But look, Meath this year, I mean, it's a tough one because we haven't seen... I mean, I've seen a bit of them play, and Jordan Morris has looked good in different spells. I felt that Jack O'Connor, Meath's very own Jack O'Connor, I think, has looked very impressive at different times as well. But I think one big find, and I think one positive that, I think the Meath fans can definitely take away from this season, I think, is Harry Hogan. I think he's had a very, very good year from a Meath perspective. I mean, Meath have struggled with their goalkeeper over the last couple of seasons. I mean, at one stage, they were nearly throwing Joe Sheridan in there, who's a forward. I mean, what on earth were they thinking of there? That was obviously a good few years ago now, to be fair. But I think Harry Hogan's been excellent. Finished with 14 points. Very good distribution on his kickouts from what I've seen. They have a free taker there who can kick from distance now that they've probably struggled with at different times as well, especially obviously no Mickey Newman there anymore. So, I think that will be one of the main positives that Meath will take away from this year. And Harry Hogan was very, very impressive, I thought, when he did play. And he'd be my pick for Meath Player of the Year. But I know there are some Meath fans who tune into this channel every now and again, so feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Moving on to Monaghan, Conor McManus would, I suppose, more often than not be the year-on-year man from a Monaghan perspective. But I do think he had a quiet enough championship, and he was quiet enough, to be fair, in the game versus Derry. And even against Mayo at times as well, he sort of just wasn't really at the races, and you'd wonder, is he sort of still going to be the man, in seasons to come for Monaghan to rely on? But one player who did step up, and trust me, as a Dublin fan, I remember it quite well, Jack McCarron, outstanding, 325 in total this season, which is a good talent, or a good tally to finish up with for Monaghan, considering that they were low down in Division 1 and also in the Championship as well. Sort of had a few of their struggling moments. So, Jack McCarron's been a great player that stepped up in big games a lot of the time as well. Stepped up against the Dubs. He was kicking some brilliant points at different stages as well against Mayo. So, McCarron for me, I think, has to be the decision there from a Monaghan perspective. Rory says, "Did you forget Laois?" I think I covered Laois. I think Mark Barry was the player I went for there. 3 goals, 23 points this year. I do think I covered Laois. I think I remember that one because that was one of the last counties I actually, or sort of when I was doing some research for this video, that was one of the counties I actually did forget and then remembered it again. So, but yeah, Ethan says, who's going to be the new Monaghan manager? I've no idea, to be honest. No idea, but I will be doing a show with, I have a few people in mind, to be fair, later in the week to come on the show, discuss the managerial merry-go-round, because there's been a lot of interesting managerial appointments. And, could Paddy Tally go in there? Could they have a crack at Malachy O'Rourke once again? Or could Malachy O'Rourke have a crack with Monaghan? I don't know, but I think those two would be two very good options there from a Monaghan perspective. Anyways, New York is the next team to discuss. I was nearly going to say next county there, but as we know, New York, not a county. I mean, look, New York played 2 games this year. I wasn't going to include them in this, to be honest, but I think it probably would have been a little bit unfair if I left them out. And Jamie Boyle looked very good for New York in that game where they played Sligo in the early rounds of the championship. Jamie Boyle, I think he was playing. Was he playing a fullback or halfback? I can't quite remember, but he done very, very well. I mean, if you remember, New York, I think, conceded 116 in that game, and that game was very, very close. I mean, going down the home stretch, it was very close. I mean, you could also look at Adrian Varley, who was very good for New York against Sligo as well. But in my opinion, I don't think you can look past Jamie Boyle, who was very good from a New York perspective. Moving on to Offaly. Really between 2 players here. I mean, Noel McNamee was outstanding. Finished as Offaly's top scorer in the end in the championship. He had a very, very impressive season. But I think Keith O'Neill has been a breath of fresh air coming into this Offaly side this year. I mean, 2-7 in total, 2-6 of which were in the Tailteann Cup. So maybe you could say in the league and championship he was a little bit more quiet. Although this has been his first season. He was part of the under-20s last year that won the All-Ireland with Offaly. He's come into the senior team this year. And it's taken a bit of time for him, obviously, to get embedded in the team, to find his way in the side. But I think he's been he's been absolutely brilliant from an Offaly perspective, and I think he's had a very, very impressive season in the end. You think of Offaly getting to the Tailteann Cup semi-finals as well. He gets himself a goal that day, finished the season very strongly, and look, I mean, who's going to be the new Offaly manager as well? I mean, that is a question that certainly will be discussed a little bit later in the week. Sligo, then you do have Niall Murphy for me. He had an excellent season from a Sligo perspective. I mean, Sligo was difficult. I mean, he had Evan Lyons, who looked very good in that semi-final versus Cavan. I thought he done very well defensively. Sean Caraboyne's been very good, but I think Niall Murphy's been excellent there from a Sligo perspective, in my opinion. I think he's had a very, very good season indeed. I mean, Sean Caraboyne would have been a player you could look at there, 140 in total this year, but Niall Murphy with 233 this season from a Sligo perspective. So I think he's had a very, very good season. And look, there are some positives for Sligo going into next season with Tony McEntee as the manager. Moving on to Tipperary, Conor Sweeney has to be the man here. I mean, Sean O'Connor had a good season for Tipperary. He was another player who I think came up from the under-20s last season, and certainly he was a big player to bring in for Tipperary, considering the likes of Mickey Quinlivan had stepped away. But fair play to Conor Sweeney. I mean, again, just another outstanding season from a Tipperary perspective. 4 goals and 36 points in 10 games, which, once again is an outrageous tally for a team that, I was going to say struggle, but they didn't struggle. They got out of Division 4, but, in many ways probably don't have any other forwards near the same level as Sweeney. I mean, Sean O'Connor is probably a player that you would think will get up to that level at some stage, but, I think Conor Sweeney's been outstanding from a Tipperary perspective. We're moving to the last couple of counties here, but we do have Roscommon who are up next. And Roscommon had a couple of very good performers. I mean, Jeremy Murtha coming off the bench was excellent from a Roscommon perspective. He changed the game twice really against Galway, you could say, coming off the bench. He made an impact both times coming off the bench. But I think Conor Cox hasn't really had the same impact last season as he's had probably under when Kevin McStay was the manager. He did finish with 47 points, which is a good number to finish up with, and did actually finish as Roscommon's top scorer in total. Well, actually tied with Donny Smith, you could say, with 137. But Enda Smith is the man for me. I think he was outstanding for Roscommon this year. Again, not only is he getting the points and the goals in decisive moments, but he's linking a lot of that together as well. So I don't think you can look past Enda Smith in my opinion. But for Roscommon fans that are watching, I would be curious to, I suppose, know your opinions in the comments down below. Moving on to the last 2 counties then. We have both Waterford and Westmeath. But before we do, Jack says here, Longford notably missed a few players, would have helped. McGivney's and Rian Brady as well. Has to be mentioned. Don't know if you know them. Brady's and McGivney would helping on a scoring front. And look, it's a fair point. Maybe, I'd be interested to see who the next Longford manager is. I don't think it has been announced. But again, maybe getting a new manager in there, maybe someone like Rian Brady will want to play again for Longford. I'm not exactly sure, but moving on to Waterford, very difficult one, this one, because I haven't seen any of Waterford play, and they finished bottom of Division 4, probably the weakest county, in the entire league and championship. Maybe you could say New York are weaker, but again, we don't know because they play considerably less games. But I have gone for Dara Corcoran, and I did a podcast with him. He's one of the very first people who came on the show, actually, back in lockdown in 2020. And look, Waterford haven't been free scoring. They haven't scored a huge amount. And it was very difficult, obviously, looking at this. Dara Corcoran finished with 112 in 8 games, a goal and 12 points. And I think he's he's been a young player that's sort of come through at Waterford in the last couple of seasons, and certainly they could do with a few more players like him, to be fair, and maybe they might be able to progress up. But again, very, very difficult one really with Waterford in my opinion. Jimmy Slyan says, have you picked Leitrim and New York? Yeah, I have. We're just coming to the last county now. New York was Jamie Boyle. Leitrim was Keith Byrne. But again, difficult one because I haven't seen enough. I mean, New York have played twice. To be fair, I've actually seen New York play in both their games. So I actually have seen every minute of what they've played. But, when you only play 2 games, it is quite difficult to pick from there. Last but not least, or, well, whatever side of the country you're on, but it is Westmeath. And Westmeath Tailteann Cup winners, as we know. Very, very impressive season from a Westmeath perspective. John Heslin has been, outstanding over the last couple of seasons from a Westmeath perspective. I mean, Ray Kennellan around the middle, Sam McCartan had a very good year. John Daly was good, but again, I think there's one obvious candidate here, or maybe not obvious. I mean, maybe you could look at a player of the talent of John Heslin and look at the numbers that he scored, but Ronan O'Toole was the man who sort of put it all together, in my opinion. I mean, so quick on his feet, he's skillful, very hard player to dispossess from what I've seen, because he sort of weaves into spaces with the ball that's kind of unnatural. And I think he's a very, very good player. I really, really do. I think he's, I think he's getting the recognition he deserves now, but I think he's been absolutely brilliant. I mean, Luke Loughlin was very good as well, 220 in total. Sam McCartan with 220 as well. Westmeath, as we very, very well know, one of the top scorers. I'm trying to find the total here for Mr. Ronan O'Toole. I had it here somewhere, but I can't find it now. So that's absolutely brilliant. But I think Ronan O'Toole has been, as I said, just absolutely brilliant from a Westmeath perspective. And he gets that goal in the or plays a big part, I should say, in the first goal against Cavan in the Tailteann Cup, and he's just been a brilliant player for Westmeath. Heslin's been very good as well, but I don't think you can look past the talent that is Westmeath. Jimmy says, what do you think of McStay with Mayo? Yeah, look, I think it's a very good appointment, and I think it's going to work. I really do. I think McStay has done a brilliant job with Roscommon. I don't think he takes any BS. He's not. The fact he's been rejected by Mayo before, in my opinion, I think we'll stand to him, because he'll go in there with fresh ideas. I think they need a new fresh man. He clearly watches football. He watches Mayo Club football. You see him on the Sunday game. He's probably one of the best pundits, in my opinion, on the Sunday game, because I think he knows probably more about the game than anyone else, in my opinion. I think he's like, even when you listen to him on podcasts and everything. But yeah, no, I think he's going to do really, really well. He'll know about the younger players going through. Be interested to see who his backroom team is. And the fact that he's already done it as a manager with Roscommon at senior level as well. He won a Connacht title and he got them to an All-Ireland quarter-final and nearly beat Mayo as well in that opening game. I know they got slaughtered in the second game. Was that 2016? I think it was 2017. One of those 2 years. And Roscommon as well, they hadn't broke. They when Anthony Cunningham took them over, they'd already won a Connacht title 2 seasons ago, so it wasn't impossible. But like Roscommon, I think it only won like one Connacht title in how many odd years before McStay came in. So look, I think he'll do very, very well with Mayo. I probably will discuss it in further detail at some point on a different show. We'll be doing another podcast later in the week discussing the managerial merry-go-round. I mean, you've had McStay, who's what we believe to be confirmed as Mayo manager. I don't know if it actually has been confirmed yet, but we're supposed to find out at some point this evening or by tomorrow. Dessie Farrell staying on with Dublin. Who's going to be Monaghan manager? Who's going to be Longford manager? That's going to be the big question at the end of the day. You're either good enough or you're not, says Jimmy, and absolutely. Look, and I think McStay is the proven manager, whereas maybe a Ray Dempsey, a Mike Solon, or was a Shaw as well. These managers probably unproven, But for Mayo's sake, they need to get that manager out there. I mean, the whole rigmarole around the Mayo manager has been an absolute circus. I mean, they're interviewing managers like they're presidential candidates. It's just a bit laughable at times from their own county board. But I do think Kevin McStay would do a great job with Mayo. Whether he wins the All-Ireland that they're all craving, I don't know. But I think they could come close. And you get players fit. I'm probably one of the few people that actually thinks that Mayo are not that far away, whereas a lot of other people probably think that they're miles away. But look, we'll obviously have to wait and see. But we will go ahead and wrap this up here. This has been the best players from all 31 counties that play All-Ireland senior football level, as well as London and New York. So 33 teams in total. Let me know in the comments down below which teams which players you believe have been the best performers for your county this year. Do hit the like button, do subscribe, stay tuned for more videos coming soon. Certainly be plenty of content coming out now over the next week. I was on holiday for the last couple of days, hence why there was no real sort of videos going out over the weekend. But we will be doing more match reactions and stuff as well for some club championship games. Obviously, some big games happening in Dublin, Mayo, Kerry as well. Austin Stacks in the relegation playoff in the Kerry Club Football Championship there, which is absolutely mental. But we certainly will be doing lots of reactions for those games in the next couple of weeks as well as some other videos lined up and all the rest. We'll wrap this up here. I'm off to watch the Liverpool Man United game. So, cheers anyone who tuned in. My name's Aaron, and I will see you all later.